I keep the flame, and the flame keeps the record. It burns brighter when you listen. On Saturday, the 25th of March, 1911, about 500 people were finishing work on the top 3 floors of a building just east of Washington Square in New York. It was a half day, close to quitting time, and the pay envelopes had gone round. Most of the workers were young women, nearly all of them immigrants, from Italian and Eastern European Jewish families. They made shirtwaists, the plain, fashionable blouse that half the working women in America were wearing that spring. The building was new, 10 stories, and it was considered fireproof. That description was accurate. It is still standing today. 146 of those people, however, would not leave it alive, and the thing that killed them was not the fire. The Triangle Waste Company occupied the 8th, 9th, and 10th floors. It belonged to 2 men, Max Blank and Isaac Harris. The work was piecework at speed. Rows of sewing machines set close together, cutting tables, and underneath all of it the waste of the trade, cotton scraps, tissue paper, lint in the air. There were 2 ways down. One stairway opened onto Green Street. One opened onto Washington Place. The record shows that the doors to those stairs were frequently locked during working hours. The reason given at the time was that the workers were stealing materials. A locked door meant that everyone leaving had to pass a single exit, where they could be watched, and if it came to it, searched. I want to be precise about the standing of that practice, because it governs everything that follows. It was already illegal. Section 80 of the New York Labor Code required that doors not be locked during working hours. That law existed before the fire, not after it. There was a fire escape on the outside of the building. On the 9th floor, it led nowhere in particular. The record's own words are that it led nowhere, certainly not to safety. Late in the afternoon, fire took hold in the factory. On the top floors, there were 3 ways out, the 2 stairways and the lifts. What happened next is documented in the testimony of the people who lived through it, and it is not complicated. On the 9th floor, workers reached the doors to the Washington Place stairs and could not open them. They went to the fire escape. It bent under the weight of the people on it. Down in the street, the fire brigade arrived quickly. Their ladders reached several stories short of the floors that were burning. The water from their hoses could not reach the top of the building either. So the people on the 8th and 9th floors had a choice between 2 deaths, and close to 50 of them went out of the windows. I am going to leave that there. It was reported at the time in detail, and it does not need me to improve on it. There was a woman across Washington Square that afternoon who heard the alarms and ran towards them. Her name was Frances Perkins. She watched the whole of it from the pavement, and she never afterwards pretended she had not. Remember her. She comes back at the end of this. 146 people died. Some of them were 14 years old. The whole thing was over in about 15 minutes. That is the part that is hard to hold in your head. Not a building burning through the night. A quarter of an hour on a Saturday afternoon at the end of a half-day's work. The building did not fall down. It was, as advertised, fireproof. It stands on the corner today, and students walk through it. On the 11th of April, a grand jury indicted Max Blank and Isaac Harris on 7 counts. The charge was manslaughter in the 2nd degree under that same Section 80 of the Labor Code. The prosecution's case was not that the owners had started a fire. Nobody said they had. The case was that the doors had been locked, that this was against the law, and that people had died behind them. The trial opened on the 4th of December 1911 and ran about 3 weeks. More than 100 witnesses were heard. The defense was conducted by a lawyer named Max Stoyer, and he did something that is still taught in law schools. He took one of the survivors, a young woman who had given a clear and vivid account of what she saw, and he asked her to tell it again, and then again. And her account came out the same each time, in almost the same words. Stoyer put it to the jury that an account which does not vary has been learned rather than remembered. That was the case for the defense. Not that the doors were open, that the witnesses could not be trusted about it. On the 27th of December 1911, the jury acquitted both men. Now, the interesting part of this verdict is not that it was perverse. It is that the jury did not think the doors were open either. One of the jurors said afterwards, "I believed that the door was locked at the time of the fire, but we couldn't find them guilty unless we believed they knew the door was locked." Read that twice. The jury accepted that the door was locked. What the prosecution could not prove was that the two men at the top of the company knew about the locking of a door in their own factory. That is the whole case. It turned on knowledge, not on the door. The families went to the civil courts instead, which is slower and quieter and takes years. On the 11th of March, 1914, 23 of those suits were settled. The figure agreed was $75 per life lost. In August of 1913, 2 years after the fire, Max Blanc was charged with locking the doors of his factory during working hours. He was fined $20. In December of that same year, his premises were found with rubbish piled 6 feet high in flammable wicker baskets. The company carried on trading until 1918. So that is the ledger. And if the account ended there, it would be a straightforward story about 2 men who got away with it. It does not end there, and this is the part that is worth your time. On the 30th of June, 1911, 3 months after the fire, the governor of New York signed a bill creating a factory investigating commission. It organized that August under a state senator named Robert Wagner, with an assemblyman named Alfred Smith as his deputy. They did not confine themselves to one building. They went and looked at the others, and they kept going. Close to 2,000 factories inspected across dozens of trades. In its first year, the commission heard 222 witnesses and produced 3,000 pages of testimony. Between 1911 and 1914, 36 new laws were put onto the New York statute book. Factory doors were to be unlocked during working hours, and they were to swing outwards. Sprinklers were required. Fire drills were required. The state's labor department was rebuilt around the job of enforcing it. The men who ran the Triangle Waste Company were acquitted, fined $20, and settled at $75 a life. And every locked door in every factory in the state was opened by law within 3 years. Not by the trial. The trial failed. And the woman who stood in Washington Square and watched it happen did not go home and forget about it. Frances Perkins went into the machinery of the state instead. In 1929, she was made New York's Commissioner of Labor. In 1933, she became Secretary of Labor of the United States, the first woman to hold a seat in an American cabinet, and one of the people who wrote the labor law of the New Deal, which the whole country still works under in one form or another. She started on a pavement in Washington Square, watching a fire she could do nothing about. It took 146 people to do it, and most of them were young women whose families had been in the country a matter of years. The building is still there. It is fireproof. It always was. That was never the thing that was wrong with it. This account is sealed. Stand on that corner if you like. Just know which way the doors opened. Sealed.